Welcome to my humble list of games that released this past year that I really enjoyed playing. Please take it simply as an excuse for me to discuss my recent favorites, not as a definitive, heavily researched, expert's opinion game of the year list. Of course, I've taken every effort to ensure that you don't get that impression, but it still bears mention up front. There are countless games, including major releases, that I missed for various reasons, time and money being chief among them. I don't do this professionally, and I actually tend to spend more time with older titles, so I just prioritize the games that I'm personally excited about, rather than the hot title of the moment. That being said, I did play 10 2023 games. This number may sound small to you, but I posit it's enough, albeit barely, for a top 5 to mean something, so here I am making this video. In the name of keeping everything spoiler-free, I will only be showing footage from the opening hour or so of each game. This also has the double benefit of easing the burden of gathering and editing gameplay footage, but we'll pretend it's all for the audience. Be aware that my talking points will by necessity include elements beyond the scope of these opening hours, but I won't go out of my way to spoil important surprises or plot elements. You shouldn't have to worry, part of the motivation of making this video is recommending these games to you, so trust that I'm not trying to ruin your experience. If you're after more exciting footage with snappy editing, I'm sure you can find game trailers on this great site called YouTube. With all of that preamble out of the way, let's dive in with number 5. Blasphemous 2 is not a groundbreaking release. It merely represents an exceptionally polished Metroidvania title. But how much more do you really want? I don't expect every game to be a revolutionary experience. There is comfort in the familiar. I've been a fan of Metroidvanias almost as long as I've been a gamer, and took a liking to the original Blasphemous when it released in 2019. That game had a few rough edges, but was overall a solid release with a distinct vision. Blasphemous 2 may be more of the same, but I was pleased to discover that it improves upon its predecessor in nearly every conceivable way. The most obvious being the removal of instant death spikes. I can't tell you how relieved I was the first time I botched a jump and lived to tell the tale. The platforming is no longer a frustrating experience, and is in fact a lot of fun when all the different movement and weapon abilities are combined into one seamless challenge. The Spanish Catholic inspiration is a wholly unique one in gaming, and the Game Kitchen clearly employs some of the most talented pixel artists in the industry. Beyond the aesthetics, the combat in Blasphemous 2 is expansive yet focused, and sets a high bar for the genre. This time around, the Penitent one can wield 3 distinct weapons, each with their own strengths, weaknesses, and skill trees. You have the balanced standard sword with its mid-air combos, life-stealing ability, and strong parry. The twin blades offer lightning-fast speed and flexible maneuverability, but require consecutive hits to ramp up damage. Finally, the mace offers predictably slow swings and no parry ability, but makes up for it with strong damage and range. At the start of the game, the player is given the choice of which weapon to use, which dictates the areas that are open to them initially, but eventually all 3 can be swapped between at will, which is where the combat system's full potential is revealed. Each player will inevitably have their own preference, the basic sword for me, but will need to utilize all 3 to face off with the frankly ridiculous variety of monsters the game will throw their way. Each zone brings with it multiple new enemy types, and often some new gimmick to set it apart so the game never grows stale. The bosses are universally excellent. Beyond their memorable designs, they are always fair, but never a pushover. Only the final boss gave me serious trouble, which made the eventual victory all the more thrilling. For me personally, a strong sense of exploration is the most crucial element a good Metroidvania must nail, and Blasphemous 2 yet again exceeded my expectations in this area. The world map is extremely open-ended, and I really appreciated being able to wander in whichever direction I chose. Charting new ground by pushing forward into the unknown, with no idea what to expect, is such a satisfying feeling. And then it's equally rewarding to return to previous areas with new tools, to open the ability gates that confounded you the first time around. Secrets are densely packed within the map and offer meaningful upgrades beyond mere completionism. I never once felt lost, and instead the challenge was often keeping track of the numerous new paths I wanted to begin exploring. Surely this is one of the best designed maps in the genre. Honestly, in all the areas that matter to a good Metroidvania, Blasphemous 2 is second to none, and that's why I had a blast playing it, and that's why it makes the list. The fact that The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom made my list shouldn't be a surprise. My Zelda retrospective series should clue you into the fact that I'm a massive fan of the series. The question wasn't if it would place in the top 5, but where it would place, and the answer is right here at number 4. In contrast to Blasphemous 2's all-around solid design, Tears of the Kingdom is a game characterized by the highest of highs coupled with the lowest of lows. And I'm not just talking about the new verticality in its world. The game has moments of sheer brilliance, held back by some of the most baffling design decisions that nearly ruin the experience. While I did really enjoy Breath of the Wild, I didn't consider it the 10 out of 10 masterpiece that many others did. The new open world style was a breath of fresh air, but I found myself really missing the staples of classic Zelda, the linear progression, the item-based exploration, and most of all the dungeons. As I endured the agonizing wait for the game, I was filled with optimism that Tears would manage to combine the two differing visions for the series into the best of both worlds. Tears of the Kingdom did not end up being that game, sadly, but it is still an excellent title that does improve on Breath of the Wild's solid foundation. There is a definite shift towards more directed progression. Some may decry this change, but in my view, it was much needed. The commitment to freedom in exploration remains intact, but now the story can be told more coherently, and I was never at a loss for what to do next. Link's new abilities are far more interesting than the tools we had in Breath of the Wild, and are very well utilized across the full gamut of combat, exploration, and puzzle solving. Ultra Hand, despite being a bit of a janky mess, doesn't just open the door to a new level of player expression and freedom, but it slams it off the hinges. Ascend totally changes how you view the game world, not to mention speeding up the sluggish climbing process. Recall is on the niche side, for sure, but I'll never get sick of sending projectiles back at my attackers, or riding fallen debris back up to the heavens. And we saved the best for last. Fuse single-handedly fixes the weapon durability issue from Breath of the Wild. All the scraps that Link forges from the map or fallen enemies are given new significance. Players have far greater incentive to engage with the world, and combat is deepened considerably by all of the creative new options the ability provides. Each weapon is now a blank slate for the player's experimentation. I was still discovering new combinations right up to the credits. While the sky and the depths aren't nearly as dense as ground-level Hyrule, they do their job staving off the deja vu I feared from the recycled map. You can't fairly blame the game for the state of its hardware, but it's impossible to pretend the technical performance didn't detract from the experience. That Super Switch can't come soon enough. To the devs' credit, it's incredible that a game of this magnitude runs on the Switch at all. Seamlessly skydiving from thousands of feet in the air through a cavern thousands of feet below ground without a loading screen would be impressive even on modern hardware. A large portion of the game's quests are mindless busywork, but that's easy to forgive when they largely exist to give the player an excuse to explore the unfathomably vast map. Maybe a little too vast, honestly, but that speaks more to my own preference as a gamer than any fault of Zelda's. As with its predecessor, this map is the true highlight of the game, and offers countless rewarding discoveries. It's a wonder to behold. I could endlessly nitpick about little things like inventory management or the beyond stupid implementation of the Sage powers, but I'll save that for the eventual dedicated video. At the end of the day, what Tears of the Kingdom is able to accomplish far outweighs its shortcomings, and it definitely earns the number 4 slot on my list. You may not know this about me yet, but I am a massive fan of the Souls games. Back in 2015, I got absolutely hooked on Bloodborne's masterful level design, demanding combat, and immersive atmosphere. Once I'd sucked every last drop from Bloodborne, I rapidly made my way through From Software's entire Souls catalog, falling in love with each game in turn. At that point, I had a depressing realization. No one else was making titles like FromSoft, and thus there was a hard limit on the number of these games I could play. That isn't for lack of trying, mind you. A glut of so-called Souls-likes have been released by a wide range of developers, but not a single one has been able to match the magic of the true Souls games. That is, until Lies of P, my number 3 pick, suddenly appeared on the scene. It's absolutely unbelievable how close this newcomer Korean studio came to standing toe-to-toe with FromSoft, and on their very first attempt no less. The only area where I feel Lies of P doesn't hold up to Dark Souls and its siblings is in the level design. It's an unfair comparison, of course. Dark Souls' dense interconnected map is literally the gold standard that future textbooks will be written about. Lies of P's levels are perfectly functional, with all of the typical shortcuts you would expect, but I never felt the thrill of exploring uncharted territory, with the potential of getting lost. The levels are all linearly connected and suffer from a dearth of secrets and hidden areas. One more complaint before we get into the good stuff. The skill tree is referred to as your P organ in-game. I don't even know how to properly respond to that. I mentioned Bloodborne in particular holding a special place in my heart, so the game's setting and combat system instantly clicked with me. The devs wear their inspiration on their sleeve. While most of the combat mechanics, such as the rally system, are lifted from Bloodborne, the parry and stagger systems from Sekiro are also thrown into the mix. When combined, we are treated with something that is greater than the sum of its parts, where there are always multiple methods of responding to enemy attacks that the game expects you to fluidly cycle through. Lies of P's weapon lineup is staggering, with a massive collection of distinct movesets on offer. Going one step further, players can mix and match different weapon attributes, which really rewards experimentation in crafting the perfect tool for a tough boss. Speaking of bosses, they are great across the board. Interesting designs, smooth animation, readable telegraphs, and the perfect amount of challenge. The story, a twist on the classic Pinocchio, began as merely a curiosity, but to my surprise, I did genuinely grow invested before long. I don't usually pay much attention to the story in Souls games. This is one area where Lies of P rises above its inspiration. Without getting into specifics, I'm extremely excited for the direction future games appear to be taking. Considering how great this first go was, I'm confident we're all in for a treat. Moving on to number 2, our runner-up game is none other than Hi-Fi Rush, the breakout surprise of the year. A total departure from Tango Gameworks, Hi-Fi Rush was shadow dropped early in the year to rave reviews. I don't have a musical bone in my body, and don't have too much experience in the character action genre, so I didn't pay it much attention at first. I'm so glad that I did eventually open my mind to something outside my wheelhouse, because oh man, this game is so special. It has the look and feel of a Saturday morning cartoon that simply overflows with personality. The writing is sharp and often laugh-out-loud funny, but with a wholesome core that I found really infectious. I instantly fell in love with the entire cast, from the charismatic heroes to the deliciously over-the-top rogues gallery. I honestly got a little emotional during the ending credits, simply because it meant I had to say goodbye to these characters. I can't tell you how much I wish for more time with my crew, whether that's in a sequel or a cartoon continuation, just give me something. Hi-Fi Rush, as it exists now, is a video game, so we should probably talk about the gameplay too. My only real complaint lies with the sloppy platforming. The levels are well designed and fun to explore, but player character Chai's movement, especially when jumping, just doesn't feel right in a platforming context. Truthfully, the 3D platforming elements are only a minor component of the game, so we can quickly move past them to the real appeals of Hi-Fi Rush. The game fully commits to the idea that everything moves in time with the beat, the environment, the enemies, and even all of your own attacks. I knew this was cool in theory, but I feared I would bounce off the game quickly because I really struggle with rhythm. Thankfully, the way it's incorporated during normal combat is very accommodating to someone like me. You are incentivized to time your inputs for extra damage, but even if you screw it up, Chai's attacks will still land on the beat, preserving the magical experience. Outside of the occasional frustrating parry minigame, my lack of rhythm didn't hamper the satisfaction of this design at all. I often played on my beloved Steam Deck, and probably attracted a lot of attention with my toe tapping and head bobbing in public. The way the visuals, music, and gameplay all sync up together makes it impossible to sit still. The various combos were easy to pull off, even for me, yet there is an obviously high skill ceiling, and I'm excited to continue practicing and hopefully reach an even greater level of satisfaction with higher style ratings. Even beyond a New Game Plus run for additional collectibles and better scores, which would have been more than enough for me, I was pleasantly surprised at the amount of challenge modes that open up after beating the game. I really believe this is a game I'm going to be returning to for years on end, and you better believe I'll have a goofy smile plastered on my face the entire time. And now, the top spot. Austin Ashworth's #1 game of 2023 is none other than Resident Evil 4 Remake. I can already hear the angry clicking of keyboards eager to inform me that, actually, remakes don't qualify for Game of the Year awards. To be honest, I had some reservations as well. One reason I was comfortable with picking this remake is because it exemplifies everything a video game remake should be. This isn't a simple, upscale, FPS boost and call it a day money grab. Capcom took one of the most beloved and acclaimed games in their catalog, if not the entire medium, and gave each element an honest evaluation. If it didn't work in a modern context, no expense was spared in pruning or reworking. As someone who only played the original RE4 for the first time just prior to the remake, devoid of any nostalgia, I admire how respectful yet extensive the facelift was. This new game functions as just that, a new game, while also paying wonderful homage to the still excellent 2005 original. Side note, I can't believe I waited so long to play the original. It's aged incredibly well, and I adored my time with it almost as much as its 2023 counterpart. As the industry ages and more remakes inevitably release, I can only hope that other developers will use RE4 Remake as a template for remakes done right. While philosophically I can make the argument Resident Evil 4 2023 deserves recognition for its role as a remake, my real argument is simply the fact that I can't remember the last time I had this much fun with a game. Scouring the meticulously crafted village, castle, and island environments for ammo, cash for upgrades, and collectibles formed an insatiable addiction for me, where I couldn't move on until I had combed every crevice. Even during these quieter moments, I was never anything less than 100% engaged, hunting for that intoxicating 100% completion. The pacing? Perfect. Always moving me on to the next set piece or zone before the experience grew stale. I loved the expanded roles and fleshed out characterizations for characters like Ashley and Louise, a vast improvement over the original. And can we all agree Leon Kennedy is one of the greatest video game characters ever? The trademark camp is toned down ever so slightly to form the perfect balance with his impossible coolness. The biggest change the remake makes from the original is totally revamping the combat loop. This was a risky endeavor with how impeccably balanced the existing system was, but the game is all the better for it. The ability to move while shooting is counteracted by increased aggression in the enemies. You won't find them as easy to stagger, and you certainly won't find them waiting their turn anymore. As a result, each combat encounter, without fail, is a tense and dynamic affair that keeps you permanently on the edge of your seat, teetering on the verge of being overwhelmed. I really don't know how to properly put it into words, but you have to trust me when I tell you that this is some of the best action gameplay I've ever experienced, and it never grew old. The game understands the importance of drawing the curtains before you burn out. It left me desperate for more, and then mercifully allowed me to indulge in the Mercenaries arcade mode and repeat challenge playthroughs. Not to mention the meaty Separate Ways campaign. I hear it's every bit as good as the main game, but I've been saving it as a juicy reward for finishing this video. If you're watching within a couple days of upload, I can promise you that I'm currently having the time of my life, savoring every minute back in the world of Resident Evil 4. Please, if you haven't played it yet, fire up this masterpiece. It's a great entry point for newcomers to the franchise as well. You really don't have any excuse. You can thank me later. And that's my list. Hopefully I managed to avoid riling up an angry mob in the comments, but I doubt it. Like I mentioned up front, I played 10 games from 2023. I've already gone over the 5 that stood out to me the most, so I might as well give you the full list so that you can get a better perspective on my top 5 and my gaming taste as a whole. I thoroughly enjoyed every new game I played this year actually. Maybe not to the extent of Resident Evil 4 Remake, but they were all good, worthwhile experiences. Those being, in no particular order, Armored Core 6, Dead Space Remake, Fire Emblem Engage, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, and Street Fighter 6. I'm not going to delve any deeper into them than that, but if you are already on the fence about one of these titles, I'd say go for it. Before I end the video, I'd also entreat you all to please share your own favorites from last year. I don't promise to take recommendations, but I am always interested to hear the lists of others. Is Baldur's Gate 3 all it's cracked up to be? I'm prepared for the licking I'm sure to receive for skipping it, but honestly, I just know it's not my style of game. You may or may not be surprised to learn that I have other interests beyond video games. For one, I'm also a real movie buff. As a companion piece to this video, I wrote about my favorite movies of the past year on my Patreon. If you enjoy my work and want to support me even more than you already have, consider joining Axel Dieker, Sarah Marguerite, and Andreas Schouten over there. Regardless, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take care.